Okay, so instead of me doing aloha, why don't you teach them the most important thing that they're going to learn in this live, which is how to do the shaka.
How to do a shaka? Well, we met in Hawaii.
We did meet in Hawaii.
Years ago. It was probably about 14 years ago. So she wanted me to teach you a proper shaka. I was born and raised in Hawaii, even though I don't look like it. But you go like that and real quick.
Real quick.
Right? None of this stuff.
None of that.
Real quick.
That's like very American mainland.
Exactly.
That's no bueno.
We've learned something new.
We've learned something new right in like the 5 seconds of this live. Aloha, April. I'm glad you're here, and AJ. So I am here with none other than Rodney Allgood. I know some of you know him very well, especially one of my best friends, Amy. She'll connect, which I learned how to say that a long time ago, because Rodney is responsible for introducing me to one of my best friends. So I'm hoping Amy can show up. I tried to, oh, hi, Tiffany. I tried to rebrand her to Amy Gold because no one could say her name.
Yeah.
But she created this mnemonic of she'll connect, like she'll connect you.
There you go.
Because she was in network marketing. So we're going to talk about, it's going to be an honest conversation. We were actually just having, I would say lunch, but it was more wine.
Yeah, more wine.
Can we admit wine?
Yeah, exactly.
On the veranda of La Jolla. I saw Rodney was in La Jolla about a week ago. He was at the exact same. Oh, and Jason Cisneros, the Bald Avenger, loves your haircut.
Right. Jason,
so you have an admirer?
Jason must have the same cut that I do.
He does. He does. So I saw Rodney Allgood post a picture about a week ago from Duke's restaurant. You saw the same sunset that I saw.
Right.
I think we were at the same exact restaurants, perhaps at the same time, or maybe just slightly off. But
yeah, I was visiting from Las Vegas and posted the picture, and she said, I was there on Sunday night, so was I, so
yeah,
probably walked right by her, but we got these masks on, right, so probably...
We were in disguise, no one could see,
exactly.
No one could recognize us. So I wanted to get him on my show because I've been watching his lives, they're lives, right, they're mostly lives, religiously over the past week, and he has just such I want to say a soft-spoken way of communicating with people that really all receive your message. And it's unique because you come from a perspective of growing up in Hawaii, which is a lot different than I think a lot of the messages we've been seeing all over Facebook, YouTube. Hey, Mark. Let's see, Jason, he's better looking than you, so now you're upset. Yeah, sorry, Jason. He was on the show a couple weeks ago, and then way back when I first launched it. So, I keep upgrading Jason. I'm sorry. So, Rodney, a couple things about Rodney. One is that I think one of the most interesting things about Rodney is that you were doing Hello World, which, if they don't know what that is, it was essentially a paid YouTube system. So he was selling Hello World subscriptions where people were paying, get this, $2,000 a month for Hello World, which was basically what is now YouTube.
Yeah,
and you introduced me to Amy, who was another Hello World salesperson, advocate. What would you
it was a
call
network
them?
Marketing company.
Network marketing, we can admit that.
Feels like a lifetime ago, but
Yeah.
this is how we met. So,
yeah.
Like we were doing a regional conference in Maui. That's what it was. We had a big conference, and you came to that. And,
yeah. And then you introduced me to my doppelganger.
Right.
He's like, you look a lot like her, and to this day, people think Amy and I are sisters, and that's what you thought.
I said, two of you need to meet because you look a lot like my friend. And, best friends today.
Because we white people all look alike. Is that it, Rodney?
No,
is that it?
You two look alike.
We really did. We really did. So aloha, Scott and Amber Spears. I love that you're here. She's another California girl. So Scott Silvenbell goes back and forth to Hawaii all the time, but can you teach him the proper way, just in case he needs a little? Yeah, the shaka.
Very quick. Very quick.
Very quick.
Right. Very quick.
Very quick.
Don't shake it. Don't shake it.
Don't shake it. Just real quick. Do that one more time.
No.
Okay. And then it's the non.
No.
Okay. Hey, Rich, how are you? My new YouTuber friend. And then Scott says, wait, you're not. Yeah, Amy and I are not sisters, but we think we are, and we tell everyone we are because no one believes that we're not related. So Rodney and I were just sipping some wine over at the veranda of La Jolla and kind of talking about what's been going on in the world, everything from masks being a political issues to the racial issues that have been going on all over. And I've been watching his lives and him communicating and talking about, so few things that we talked about, and I feel like we should always record our chats because they're all interesting. So we're going to try to share what some of the things we talked about. But starting off, and you talk to corporations, colleges, and high schools, and he's going to go around the country, whether via Zoom if you're a corporation that wants to hire him and have him speak to your corporation, or whether you are a high school or college that you want to bring him in. His conversation on, you said, race, prejudice, and racism, and they're different. So let's start off there and then share your thoughts with people, and we'll see who jumps in and asks you questions.
Scott knows a proper shaka.
He does.
Okay, so I've been speaking a lot on this subject. I'm a speaker, typical motivational speaker, but for the next year or so, I really want to focus on uniting people, bringing people together, and getting people past this whole wanting to be right. On Facebook, you probably noticed that people are just arguing their specific points of view, just seeing things from a confirmation bias and not really understanding each other. So I want to really educate people on this. I think I have a very different point of view on racism. Being a black man who was raised in Hawaii, I may not have some of the chips on my shoulder that some people have. So I think I'm able to see things from a very, very clear point of view on both sides, and being able to unite people, getting people to stop and understand the experience of other people. That's what progresses people forward. You know, my mom and dad are from Tennessee and Alabama. My mom's from Tuskegee, Alabama. That is a place full of black history, the Tuskegee Airmen, all that stuff. My mom grew up with the Commodores, and you know, my aunts grew up with the Commodores, and it's a place that a lot of black history. So I was always educated about the history of my race, even though I was raised in Hawaii. But coming from that place, I'm able to see where people get things confused a lot of times. And a lot of times people mistake judgment, prejudice, and racism. They're three different things. And people tend to put everything in the bucket of racism. You know, judgment is something we all do. We all judge things. It's part of what keeps us safe as human beings. We have to always ascertain what feels dangerous, what doesn't feel safe, so we judge. But in judgment, we're open to adjusting what we may have thought. Hearing footsteps in the daytime is not like hearing footsteps in the middle of the night in the dark. It has a totally different meaning. So we all judge. And then there's prejudice. Prejudice is when people make a judgment without having all the information, or have a negative point of view prematurely. Maybe you've bought into a stereotype, but you're prejudiced against something. That's still not racism. Racism is when a race believes that their race is better than another race. Racism usually comes from the side of the person holding the marbles, holding the bag, who can make the laws and make the decisions. Right? So a lot of times people claim reverse racism. That's not reverse racism. What you have is prejudice. Right? So when we understand the difference, then we know what to attack, what to go after. You see, prejudice can be fixed very quickly most times. If you're a very quality person, if you're a person that's kind and loving and just, and somebody was prejudiced against you, usually in a few minutes that person changes their attitude about you and says, I was wrong. How many times have you seen women who maybe have a particular prejudice against another woman, thinking she must think she's this or that, or she's stuck on herself, or maybe she's shy. A lot of shy, very beautiful women get looked up as stuck up. People think they're stuck up. Then you get to know the person and find out, wow, she's the nicest girl ever. That was prejudice and that was judgment. See, but it wasn't racism. So we can attack prejudice. We can do something to make a crack in prejudice. And when you have enough information that proves yourself wrong over and over and over again, that starts to deteriorate your racism. When you have evidence that proves you're wrong over and over again, you will start to question your racist beliefs. That's why a lot of kids who are raised racist by racist parents go to college, and maybe they have some great, new black friends. They were never raised around them. They just knew what their parents told them. And they go to college and they go, Mom and Dad were absolutely wrong. My best friend's black. I know his family, they're wonderful people. You see, and that starts to deteriorate racism. But what we need to do that is an understanding of each other. We need some tolerance, we need some patience, and we need to give each other grace as we begin to understand each other, to know where each other's coming from, to know the recent history of different minorities, not just black people, but all people. And once we start to do that, then we make some headway. We will make some serious headway if the goal is to unite, not to be right.
That's a good saying. We could have put that as a title.
Right.
That could have been our title. And that's talking about that, being right, as far as instead of coming from a place of understanding, talk a little bit about what you're seeing online, where people are getting triggered, people are getting poked, people are seeing a news story and they're sharing it, as opposed to doing a little digging. And then I also want to talk a little bit about how you walk in La Jolla and do the nod.
It's just human nature to believe that what we see is the way it is. It's human nature to believe that what we see through our lenses is the truth. And the mind is designed to just look for confirmation of what we believe. So what we're seeing a lot of on Facebook and different social media platforms is people trying to verify their thoughts. They're trying to verify what they already believe. Instead of learning what someone else's experiences may have been. So it's all about learning to look at life through the lenses of another person, not just confirming what you believe, because there's no growth. The second you believe you have the truth about anything, there's no more growth. You're stuck right there. So that's what we're seeing a lot of, is people just seeing the world through their own confirmation bias.
And they'll stick to that argument as opposed to, oh, this is a different point of view, let me sit down and actually listen, right? So how can someone adjust from that I want to be right? Because this is an ego thing, right? So how do you help people shift their mindsets from, oh shoot, I just like, 'cause I have friends that will share a lot of different things. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that before, right? Like, I don't know if you know a friend of mine, Alicia, she was recently talking about the word thugs, and I didn't know it had such a racial connotation. And she talked about how when she was growing up and her dad would talk about that word, and it was a charged word, right? So that was like an aha moment. It's like, oh, okay, check, don't use that word. So things like that, where people, one of the things you described it at lunch or wine in the veranda, was ignorance, right? Like some people are ignorant, they're not racist, they just don't know. And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now with, when we talked about Black Wall Street, so let's talk a little bit about that, educating people on something they just don't know about, and they're like, oh, this is something that happened, we didn't know about it, and now there's an aha moment, or there's a word, or there's a ritual, or there's a habit that's been out there, and someone just doesn't know it's not the right thing to do. So how do you shift those types of thoughts for people?
Well, first of all, we have to realize that there are so many good white people, white brothers and sisters in the world that really want to do right. They really want to live in a world that is devoid of these things. And I think what a lot of people miss is that there's a lot of people that don't have a racist bone in their body, and they don't understand what the issue is because they've never been racist. The world's always been fair to them. From what they've seen and what they've witnessed, the world's fair. So
they think it's all fair for everyone.
Right. So when some of the things that you see happening in the streets, or some of the turmoil, some of the anger, or some of the Black Lives Matter type thing, they don't get it because they truly don't have a racist bone in their body. And a lot of times, a lot of white people grew up with black people actually being their heroes, right? So they especially don't see it. They've grown up with the Cosby Show being their favorite show. She mentioned Oprah Winfrey being such a influential person in her life.
She was my teacher, right? Like, she was our mom, she was our teacher. She taught us so many things that one culture wouldn't know about another culture. Right.
So it could be
Prince, you talked about.
It could be Michael Jackson.
And
Michael Jackson was the biggest thing ever, right, back in the day, or Prince. Or Eddie Murphy, or Denzel Washington. And, you know, there were so many black heroes for white folks that they truly don't see the problem. So sometimes somebody who's white might say something that sounds insensitive to a black person. The black person takes offense, not understanding that the white person actually has been looking up to black people all this time.
Right.
Right? And then you get, thrown through the buzzsaw because you say something the wrong way.
Yeah.
So what I see is that, for blacks, we have to embrace white folks. We have to embrace people that want to see a better world. We can't throw people through the buzzsaw just because you said something the wrong way, you used the wrong word. For things to change, there has to be critical mass, which means the majority of people have to begin to see things a certain way. If blacks keep pushing away white folks because they use the wrong word, okay? You'll never hit critical mass because blacks are only 12% of the population. So we need to start uniting and coming together. And we need to start seeing what are these things? Why is this person not getting it? Somebody says Black Lives Matter, somebody says all lives matter. Okay? Don't run that person through the buzzsaw because they think that or said that. Educate them. Don't attack them. They're saying all lives matter because all lives have always mattered to them. They're just looking through their lenses. So educate them as to why the saying is Black Lives Matter. Okay? Educate, don't attack people. And for white people, white brothers and sisters, learn a little bit about the history of why so many black people might be angry today. The recent history. People talk a lot about slavery, which was a long time ago, but the Jim Crow era ended 2 years before I was born, which meant blacks couldn't drink from the same fountain, couldn't swim in the same swimming pool, couldn't eat in the same restaurants, couldn't stay in the same hotels. And I could go on and on of how my parents grew up. Right? So attitudes are passed on from generation to generation. Learn about you talked about Black Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
Black Wall Street in the early 20s, where blacks got together and became very successful. Black Wall Street, businesses, banks, everything. They were creating their own in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the town was burned down because blacks were becoming too successful. So
extremely successful.
Extremely
successful.
Some
of the wealthiest, right?
So these are the reasons that things get passed and attitudes get passed on from generation to generation. Why kids might, be inherently angry sometimes because it was passed on from generation to generation. And when you understand those kinds of things, you make a little leeway. And you start addressing it a little bit differently because you're coming from an educated place. Right. So it's on both sides. It's not one side or the other. Blacks also need to embrace white people too, and we all need to start seeing each other as individuals.
Instead of their melanin.
Yeah.
Just because we don't have a good
see
enough
each
tan.
other as individuals, but at the same time, don't not see color.
Right.
Okay. Now I'm going to say something that a lot of people don't address. You always want to see color because that's what makes the world beautiful. You don't go to a dog park and say, it's just a bunch of dogs. No, there are different kinds of dogs. Some tall, some short, some stocky, some golden, some black, some whatever. That's what makes the world beautiful. So instead of not seeing color, see the beauty in color. See the beauty in differences. Right? That's
and talk about them.
And talk about it. Just be fascinated and see the beauty in things. What we've done is we've really, in America, we've made a standard being one thing. And if you're not that one thing, then, some things weren't attainable for you. But now, with this generation, our generation, and the generation especially that follows us, we could teach them something new.
Yeah. Because they may not have been exposed to the things that your parents and your... I'm trying to think who it was, and I don't know if it was in the movie that Octavia Spencer played. Madam.
Oh, right. Madam C.J. Walker.
Yes. So talk a little bit about that because I didn't know that from the... So I watched the series right when quarantine happened and everyone was like, Tiger King. I was like, Tiger King? Self-Made was one of the best series and it was only 4 episodes and it was about Madam C.J. Walker. I just wanted to say J. So Madam C.J. Walker, and she was the first female millionaire. There was no racial description of her, just being the first female millionaire. And I thought it was later on in the 50s. You said it was like 1910.
Well, Madam C.J. Walker died in 1919.
Yeah.
Okay, so she She was America's first female millionaire, not just black female millionaire, female
millionaire, which to me at this point, that's 100 years ago.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
like billionaire at this point.
Right.
So talk a little bit about her, and that you said she was born a slave, or her mother was born a slave?
Her early life.
She was.
Yeah.
She was.
So,
Wow.
Yeah, she was born right around the time slavery was ending, I believe. But
she created a hair product. Just to give you a little bit of backstory, she created a hair product, and she wound up having it distributed in department stores.
I'm gonna teach you something.
Okay.
Madam
I only learned from the movie,
C.J.
so.
Walker created the distribution template that Mary Kay and network marketing companies use to this day.
So that's why you were successful with Hello World.
That was created by Madam C.J. Walker. She had the whole system of, having people have people under them and all that kind of stuff.
I saw her in the movie, but she's like, I was like, oh, that's what we did with MLM stuff.
Right.
Oh,
So,
that's interesting.
Right. So Mary Kay and all those beauty companies
Learned
still
from
use what she created back then.
And her product still exists? Is there still a dynasty there?
I think it got sold and sold and sold. It's not even called the same thing. But the thing about it is this is not taught. Young black women are not taught about Madam C.J. Walker in school. We are taught a lot of things that aren't true. Okay, I'm not going to get into the particulars of it, but there's a lot of things that we're taught about that aren't true, that these aren't who these people were. And again, changing times where kids are educated, black and white kids are educated about these kinds of things. Everything will appear differently. One thing that really affects people is when you grow up not seeing people look like you on TV or of any kind of status. Like when I was a kid in the 70s, any black person that's watching this will identify what I'm going to say, but when I was a kid in the 70s, when the Jackson 5 were on TV, it was like a national holiday for us. I mean, the Jackson 5 is going to be on Sonny and Cher or, Carol Burnett or whatever show it was. It was such a big deal because as a little kid, I got to see somebody that looked like me, that was my skin tone and, had big afros and all these kinds of things. So it's a big deal. Today we live in a different age. It's a time to outgrow, expand beyond the old paradigms. These things aren't needed anymore.
Oh, that reminds me of what we talked about at the veranda, where we're talking about Eddie Murphy and the comedians and how one was threatened by another and now we're seeing Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson appearing in the same movie, where before there was like one role for diversity, and you were talking about, well, what if you want an angry guy? Who do you call? Samuel Jackson.
Yeah. So I was telling her how a lot of times, again, people had their heroes that were black in movies and comedy and whatnot, but a lot of times you just could have one, right? So in comedy, it went from Richard Pryor to actually from like Bill Cosby to Richard Pryor to Eddie Murphy to Martin Lawrence to Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock. Be like one of everything, right? If you want an angry black man in a movie, it's always Samuel L. Jackson, right? If you want the intelligent black man, it's usually going to be Denzel Washington. So I'm not saying it's as simple as just that, but there are limited opportunities. Normally on a sitcom, you got the one cool black neighbor that pops his head in every now and then, right? But things are changing, and they're changing with the embracing of people in general. It doesn't have to be based on black and white. It can be based on our fascination, us loving the differences. Somebody asked me a question. Let me scroll back.
So
what is this?
Mark Fonseca, Rodney, have you engaged with any of the figureheads of BL and Black Lives Matter? If so, how do they view your philosophy? Oh, good question.
No. The most people that I know don't really carry my philosophy in that most people talk at each other. Right? It's wanting to force a point of view onto another person. If there's not an acknowledgement of what other people are seeing and what other people are experiencing, if you can't balance that out, the people you're talking to stop listening. So there's a reason why black people feel the way they feel. If white people learn the history, they'll get it. There's a reason why a lot of white folks want to join the movement, or they want to help out. There's a reason why sometimes they might be ignorant about things. There's a reason behind everything. And if we begin to look at each other as brothers and sisters first, if we begin to assume that we're on each other's side, we'll get a lot further than assuming our differences make us incompatible and that everything's difficult, because it's not that difficult. I was telling her earlier that,
talking about the
scroll up
record?
to make sure. Yeah, I mean,
Hey, Bill Lloyd.
growing up in Hawaii, I was always the only black person in school or in my class, so it doesn't bother me. I'm in La Jolla right now, right, and walking up and down the beach. I'm not uncomfortable at all, because anyone I see, I will nod my head, I will say hello, I'll say good morning, and people want to embrace you. But if you have the idea that I don't belong, you have the idea that these people don't like me, if you have the idea like where's all the other brothers at, if I have that idea, I will create the reality that I see. You see, your mind always is looking to make yourself right about whatever you believe. Your mind is always looking to make yourself correct about that subconscious belief. So if I walked around here feeling out of place, I would be treated out of place because I feel out of place. My energy would come up. People would pick up on that. Dogs pick up on people, right? We know dogs that just love certain people because they feel the energy. So when we look at each other as brothers and sisters, and that's why I always say my white brothers and sisters, that's not a term reserved for black people in my world. My white brothers and sisters. You might have had a different experience than I have, but we could come together.
So I want to talk about another controversial topic that you posed that I have not. I think one other person talked about this recently publicly. Otherwise, some people will just DM and have these conversations. Oh, and by the way, a couple people are saying, William Lloyd says it's great. He's my old teacher. Not that he's old, but he's my former teacher when I was a kid. And Jason Cisneros says creating separation before it happens, exactly. So one of the things we were talking about over wine earlier is about rap music and about leaders within the community providing leadership. And I've seen this one other person talking about this and saying we need to lead for the next generation and how we treat one another. And we talked about both sexism, how women treat one another, and also the community itself as far as rap. And further then talked about Tyler Perry and people now owning the record companies. But before Tyler Perry owned The Lot, which is now the largest film production. And you said, where is that now? It's not in
Atlanta.
Hollywood. It's in Atlanta. And same thing with record company. Now you have Eminem owning it. So there's a lot more control of artists owning the labels. But before then, they didn't. And music, talk a little bit about your philosophy about that, if you dare.
True racism is insidious. There are people that run things that understand that the best way to enslave people is for them to enslave themselves, enslave the mind. So I'm of a belief that in the early 90s, mid 90s, it became very fashionable for not just men of color, black men, but also for women. Women are also threatening the people in power. To start calling themselves the B word, start calling themselves the N word, to start degrading themselves and not holding themselves like the kings and the queens that we really are. We will never get anywhere using words like those and terms like that upon ourselves. I always ask my black brothers and sisters, what do wealthy white men call each other that's equivalent to the N word? Do they do anything that refers to themselves that way? So I believe that there was a movement in that time, because it's not black people who distribute records. They can own labels, but they don't distribute records. So the powers that be actually tell you what kind of music to begin making. So the insertion of that word started happening about then, over and over and over again. Right? So you're trying to make such a negative word a powerful thing, and it's not. If me and you can't talk the same language, if there are words you can't use when talking to me, but that person can use that word because they have the same color skin as me, we can never unify because I got different rules for you.
Yeah.
Right? So that is something that has to be addressed. Not only black folks, but women also. Women can't keep calling themselves, you know, bitches and hoes and all these kinds of things. You can't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
it keeps the entire sex down. It doesn't like. We talked a little bit about that. How there are some women who want to be the only female speaker or the only female this or that, as opposed to no, we will all succeed when we bring each other up. Rodney, also, you were mentioning how right before the whole rap movement that there was we would see leaders very distinguished.
Oh, yeah.
And so again, this reminded me of Black Wall Street.
Right.
Like you're seeing the community rise up and be wealthy, and we're looking up to them, and there's leaders that you go, oh yeah, I want to aspire to that person. And then you said all of a sudden then rap culture came in with terms that were degrading.
I would say music more than just rap. Rap's been around for a while, and rap wasn't always like that. But I was mentioning to her there was a time in the early 90s that a lot of the movies were of powerful black people, lawyers, doctors. A lot of those movies with, you know, Taye Diggs and Morris Chestnut and Eddie Murphy, Boomerang, and those kinds of movies, they're not made anymore. Tyler Perry is the only person that makes those movies. Hollywood does not make those movies anymore. Right? There was an awakening. There was people were really losing the labels at that time, and then everything shifted, and you know the clothes and the fashion became very kind of threatening to people. Right? So there's things behind the scenes that I think people buy into sometimes that are created so they kind of hold themselves in place. But you know, someone had mentioned, Mark made a good point. He says, as long as the powerful people have agendas, the world will be difficult. And that is true, Mark. The difference in the world today is we can do what we're doing right here. You know, we have access to social media. We have access to YouTube. We have access to a lot more things where we can get a message out, and if that message resonates, we do have a say. Black people are getting behind the scenes of things, like Tyler Perry, again, creating a movie studio that's as big as the 3 major movie studios in Hollywood combined. They're getting behind the scenes. There'll be sports ownership soon. There are more black billionaires, Kanye West and Jay-Z and Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey and, you know, Robert Smith, Bob Smith. I mean, there's a lot of Bob Johnson, not Smith. A lot of people rising up, getting behind the scenes, and this will begin to change things. So we've got to do our part. We can't change everything. There's a part where the power structure will change. You know, you'll see ownership in sports. Michael Jordan owns the Charlotte Hornets, and you'll see ownership in different things change in movies, people behind the scenes. That's where the real money is. Real money's not in front of the camera, it's behind the camera. We're starting to get that. Right? We're starting to get smart. We're starting to understand money. Right? We're getting to a place where, no, we don't need 15 cars and, you know, millions of dollars in chains. You know, that's happening. That awakening is happening. But we also have to do our part down here also. Powers that be, it needs to shift up here, but we also got to do our part down here. And it's not just black folks. It's when blacks and whites come together. Okay? And then the rich can have their agenda, and their agenda will stop working at some point in time. If you study history, some major shifts have happened in history. If you study history, you study the true origin of even black people, it will surprise you how power has shifted over time. That's a good study, you know, studying the Moors and things that happened years and years and years ago. So shifts can happen. I think we're at the beginning of another shift.
The Moops? The Moops, not the Moors?
The Moops?
Do you remember Seinfeld?
Oh.
Do you remember that or no?
No, I don't.
It was a funny episode. People are going to have to go on YouTube and look at that with who is it, Jason Alexander, where he played a game with Bubble Boy, and it was the Moops and not the Moors. But he's right, comedy, but I'm bringing that up as far as Google, because you also said a thing earlier as far as doing the research. Like it takes a modicum of research. When you get triggered, or when you see something online and it triggers you and it angers you, there's manipulation going on there that's triggering more of our American friends than ever before. And we always see this every 4 years, but we're seeing it way more now because of social media. It's so easy for people to just click that little button and share it before they even do any research. Just again, a modicum of research. So what I like about your message is it's this hope, it's healing, and doing the education and spreading the history. Like, we can share the history. Yeah. We can share the things that we haven't learned in our school system, right? It's you learning something and then you sharing it. So sharing the good news, not just the stuff that triggers you, that's called outrage porn, and we're seeing it more than ever because now social media has adopted what traditional media knew, because they will get more likes, more engagement if they just push your buttons. And everyone, no matter what side they're on, right? Even masks are a trigger. Like, everyone's arguing, like in my feed. So one of the things that I've been doing this past week or week and a half is filtering out and not spending any time on the arguments and the feed. And all of a sudden my news feed shifted and it changed. And another part of this was I started clicking on ads that I liked. So one very innocuous example is digital planners. I'm looking for a digital planner. I saw an ad. I was like, oh, interesting. I spent time. My eyeballs are there. And by the way, this is what's being studied. Where your eyes are looking, where you're clicking on, where your mouse is hovering over, this is being studied. And then you're getting more of the things you pay attention to. So you and I know a lot about NLP and the reticular activating system, right? Where what you focus on, you get more of. This is happening more than ever with the algorithm, with TikTok, with Facebook, right? So all of a sudden, if you start shifting and focusing on some of the positive messages in your feed, so follow Rodney, his messages are incredible, right? You don't seem to have the even arguments on your feed, really. Not that I've seen. If so, you delete them beforehand.
No.
So focus on those types of messages.
We got a couple of messages here I want to address.
So we have Mia, Ma, and Mark. Just treat
Mary
everyone
Joy. Treat everyone with respect. I can't see your whole comment, but it says treat everyone with respect, kindness, honestly. Can't we just accept people as humans? And then more comments are coming in, so let's just say. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me address. Is that?
And then good discussion. Everything starts with the heart.
Right.
Two good ones present. William
so let's start with Ma. Absolutely correct.
Let's see if I can see more. Let's see if I click on hers.
Does more come out?
I just don't know if I'll end the feed.
I don't think it does.
I'm a little afraid.
Okay, so I think I get the gist, Ma. Treat everyone with respect and kindness. Very true. That is very true.
It's what you do and how you receive so well, I believe.
At the same time, it's important to be educated about other people because they might not see that. They might be, attitudes and the way people see the world is passed on from generation to generation. So sometimes someone could take offense at something and you don't know why, and it might be, just treat everybody with kindness and respect, and they feel as if that person is being dismissive of their journey. So it's important to treat people with respect and kindness, but it's also important to understand the journey of people, because it is the thing that may make them angry. It is the thing that may make them not be very tolerant or snap or whatever it is. Understanding people is also important, but it is very important to have the attitude you have. And again, it's people like you that probably don't have a prejudice bone in your body, but history does have some merit, because what we are dealing with in the present is the culmination of what was done in the past. Today, and what we experience today, is all about the decisions and attitudes and actions of the past. That's why we're facing it. So we cannot act like it doesn't exist. We can't just shove it and act like, just be nice, just be kind, and act like nothing happened. There's an understanding that also must go with that if we're going to go forward. But again, I love the fact that you probably don't have a racist bone in your body. William says communication is key with one another. Don't use the media as a way to talk to one another. awesome. I can't read the rest of your comment, but that is true. The media is very divisive. It labels people. It pits people against each other. It's dismissive. When we put people in labels, labels do one of two things. Labels make people one of us, or labels make you want to dismiss everything a person says. Life is not an either or. There's truth on both sides of many, many things. But labels make you dismiss people not like you. So if your label is I'm right wing, then you dismiss everything on the other side. If your label is left wing, you dismiss things on the other side. It's just labels. When there are truth on both sides of anything like that. And race is another thing like that. Okay? Why do we need discussions about racial equality? We need discussions about racial equality because it's not equal. We're working toward equal. We, as black folks, we must admit the progress. That's a mistake. A lot of people will say, you know what, we haven't progressed. It's the same as it's always been. It's the same. No, we had a black president. That's huge, major progress. But racial equity is when I had a racial inequity is when I was 20 years old and I'm in Los Angeles sitting at a park waiting to play basketball, and a cop assumes I'm there to sell drugs, and he puts a gun to my head and threatens me and rips my headliner off and rips my carpet out looking for drugs and throws me on the sidewalk handcuffed until my friends come and he sees that we were there to play basketball and I was telling the truth. That's what racial inequity is. And that story is not an unusual story for a black person. So that is why we're discussing racial inequity, so that we can come to understand each other, so that the inequities can cease.
Did you see the movie Just Mercy?
No.
So it was out this past
Right, I think I did.
winter.
What was that about? Right. I did. The man was put in jail.
I want to say Stevenson was the attorney, and I'm trying to think of the actors. Jamie Foxx was the one.
Yes, I did.
And it was based on a true story, and then he was vindicated, and he was released. He was on death row. To me, that is one of the movies, and right now it's free on Amazon and iTunes, perhaps on Netflix. And this is a major motion picture, and they've decided this past month to offer it for free for everyone. So what it tells you is what expands on what Rodney is talking about as far as how you're seen. This guy was picked up. He was a lumberjack. He cut down trees, right? And he was picked up because he fit a profile, he fit a description, and then somebody literally just lied, and they put him at the scene, and with no DNA testing, nothing like that exists now. And he was just released, he was like in the 80s and 90s, and there's others that are released in the 90s. So it's not something that we're talking about that happened hundreds of years ago or even 100 years ago. This is a decade or two ago. And then Stevenson, who's the attorney who represented him, who got him released, he was a young attorney. He went to Harvard, and his mother warned him because he was going down south to represent people on death row. So there's so many stories of this happening where it's innocent people being sent to jail. And if this happens in your community, you develop a this is not fair attitude, right? And then you start giving up. So we talked about Black Wall Street earlier, right? When you have a community that rises up and you hit this level of success and all of a sudden it gets burned, you start what's called learned helplessness. And then that is something that is just passed on. And we've seen this with psychology, that if you don't think you can win, and I'm sure you can think of an example of any game you've ever played as a kid, and you're just like, I can't win. You know, whether it's basketball or gymnastics or whatever sport you tried and stopped, that was called learned helplessness. So that's what you're talking about here. And if you see this in a community where, again, like Rodney, he's the sweetest guy, right? Like, if you don't take him for face value and just go, like, he just has this sweet spirit, that's somebody being targeted, right? And being treated differently just because you're more tan than me.
Right. So
and that's it.
It's not about not having discussions. When we don't have discussions, things have a tendency to disguise themselves and remain. It's about having a different discussion.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the other thing too. And Rodney, so I'm here with Rodney Allgood. If you are here a little bit late, we met about, I'm going to say 15 years ago, 14, 15 years ago in Hawaii. He was speaking at a conference. He actually introduced me to someone who is now one of my best friends in Las Vegas. And we met and we connected. He sold what is essentially now YouTube, but he sold a service that provided video marketing for businesses. And we connected over the years, and thankfully, because of social media, I've been able to stalk him wherever he goes. And recently, he's been coming up in my feed, and because I like his stuff and because we communicate, I see more of his stuff in my feed. So what I want to encourage all of the people that are on this live right now or follow me, start liking the people that have this positive message that bring you into the future, right? We want to look at what's happening now. We want to examine and learn what happened in history, and then we want to find leaders and set examples of what our future will look like. And I believe right now we're at this point in history where we're setting history. Right?
Yeah,
what we
absolutely.
do, the conversations we have, the messages that we have, and the things you pay attention to, the things that you share, the conversations that you participate in will set our future. So that's why I think Rodney Allgood's message is important, and I will definitely leave a link for you to connect with Rodney. I think he's tagged in this post, so you can follow him. And do you have a fan page?
I do. Rodney Allgood, motivational speaker.
He's all good. I feel like you were blessed with a really good last name because you're all good. You've lived up to that label.
I try, right? It's a difficult task, but I try my best.
Well, and what I want to see more of is you raising other leaders with the same type of messages, right? To educate people and then provide that hope, provide the healing, provide a perspective that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. And I think it's because you're a peacemaker. And unfortunately in social media, you get engagement when you push buttons.
Yeah.
Right? When you get involved with what is called outrage porn. You get something and you're irritated and it pisses you off and you share it, you're now participating in the problem of outrage porn. To me, and I know this is going to be really controversial more than anything we've said so far, Tiger King was exactly that. Tiger King was just it was just outrageous. We're watching abuse to animals and abuse to people. This is sex trafficker. We were all talking about this sex trafficker. If this is a spoiler alert, I don't care. Right? The guy offs himself on national TV. Right? We're watching horrible things. We're feeding our mind with horrible things, and we wonder why we're mentally exhausted right now, because that's all we're feeding ourselves with. So I wanted to introduce you to Rodney because he's got a message that is educational and it's filled with hope. It's solution focused, right? So start liking things that provide you with more hope as opposed to more hatred. That's my message, I think.
Yeah. It's all about what you feed your mind, because we're always correct about what we choose to believe. So if we feed our mind garbage, if we feed our mind things that are divisive, things that pit us against each other, then we'll create that reality. It's very hard to be happy from that place.
Yeah.
But if we fill our minds with hope, if we focus on the world we wish to see, if we every day take steps in that direction, if we want to see a unified world, we got to behave in a unified way. It's not anybody else's duty to do that. It's upon each and every one of us to do our part to create what we wish to see.
So thanks, Pastor Lloyd. So proud of my former student who's now one of my teachers. So he's been getting involved with a lot of online stuff. So I've been kind of guiding him to use things like StreamYard so he can spread his message to more people. I want to talk a little bit, Rodney, about what you do to inspire yourself on a daily basis, to put yourself in a positive state. When I first met you again 14, 15 years ago in Hawaii, you were so inspirational, and you still are. What do you do to keep yourself in that state of mind? Is there a daily ritual?
Yeah, every day it's how I begin my day. I call it bookending my days, because I don't like a lot of structure. We're probably the same.
We talked about that.
Right? So,
I realize this is why we get along.
But having my bookends, which means starting my day the right way and ending my day the right way, and doing it pretty much the same way every day, that helps. So Your world is controlled by your emotions. Your emotions are so powerful. And if you don't take control of your emotions, if you're not the one managing your emotions, then a post on Facebook will dictate that. Then what's on CNN or Fox will dictate that. When things around you will start dictating your emotions, you'll be living a life that is reactional and not intentional. So when I get up in the morning, I meditate, I exercise, and I read a chapter of a book. That's it, one chapter. My exercise routine is about 35 minutes long, not very long. Okay? And I meditate. Mind, body, and spirit are taken care of before most people wake up. So I can't be in a bad mood at that point. Right? I'm in a great mood.
Triggered your endorphins.
Right. I triggered my endorphins.
Yeah.
I took care of my mind, body, and spirit. And over time, you do that for a year, 2 years, you're in absolute control of things. So I don't watch the news at all. I have not watched the news in 7 years because there's an...
This is why you're happy.
Yeah.
That's the secret.
Right. Because...
when did you decide to stop watching the
About
news?
7 years ago.
And like why? What was the...
I didn't watch TV for 7 years.
That's really good.
Okay? So I just started watching Netflix
Yep.
like 6 months ago because it's an event.
Yeah.
I can decide to watch a movie or a documentary.
You don't get stuck in the endless
But I
scroll.
don't watch TV. I still don't watch cable TV or any of that stuff. So I control what's going on in my mind because your reality is what you see. What's in here will manifest out here. So that's important, controlling my emotions and knowing that I am in full control of it. It's huge.
There's a story. I don't know if you want to share it or if you want to share something else, but you were saying you were in an industry before Hello World, before tech. You were running a dump it, pump it.
Oh, I had a sewage pumping company, pumping septic systems. I had that for 20 years. It was called Suck 'em Up Pumping. If anybody is on here from Maui, they know that company because I actually made a commercial that became so famous. Jay Leno wanted me to put me on the Tonight Show.
Oh, wow.
My commercial, we took Ghostbusters and we changed the words and we're singing about pumping sewage. And
Are you going to call?
oh my God, it was. I became famous for like 4 or 5 years. It was crazy.
Huh. So you want to talk about what you did in that industry? Because you changed people's minds there.
Yeah,
You're like a mind shifter.
I used to go to the national convention for poop pumpers.
I knew we'd get into a poopy discussion here.
There's a convention for everything.
It's true.
And 13,000 people in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you understand this septic tank industry, that's a very rural America industry. So 13,000 people, 95% white people from middle America. I mean, I'm talking flannel shirts and the South or middle America, you know, NASCAR, you know, hats and big belt buckles and, you know, boots and those type of people. And
did you wear flannel back then?
no, hell no. But I would walk into the ballroom every year, true story, and all the black guys were in the corner when I walk in the ballroom because they were so uncomfortable being there with 13,000 white folks. So I'd walk in the ballroom and I would hear, hey brother, come on man, we over here brother, come on brother. And they were gathering each black person as they walked through the door so they could
To a safe zone.
To be together because they were so uncomfortable. But if you were listening earlier, I was raised in Hawaii, so I was always the only black guy. So I'm not uncomfortable in those scenarios. So I would see someone, I remember this one guy, and his name was Billy Ray. I mean, that's what you would think. So I walked up to him and I said, hey, what's your name? And he looked a little taken aback because he just had this not friendly look on his face. And he kind of taken aback and he goes, I'm Billy Ray. He put his hand, I go, I'm Rodney, good to meet you, Billy Ray. And I started talking with him and I just saw something just change. He just relaxed. And what I figured out is that he was assuming that I don't like him. Normally, the person was assume that back and that stalemate happens.
Yep.
But because I broke the barrier, I became his friend. And I would do that over and over and over again. And in my 8 years of going to that convention, I was probably one of the most popular people there. They all loved me, right? Again, I was breaking through prejudice.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're just joining, remember, prejudice and racism is not the same thing. I was breaking through prejudice. And they just loved having this black friend, right? And they would say a lot of inappropriate things, but I don't get mad because I know I'm making progress. So this one old man, you know, he saw me, I don't know, 2 or 3 years in, and he liked me from the year before, and he goes, Rodney. I got back, and I was telling my family, I said, I met this young colored man named Rodney, and oh, if more of America could be like this young man, and he was going on saying the most offensive things if I wanted to take it that way, but I just was glad that he had a brick taken out of his wall of the stereotype he carried his whole life, right? And that's what we can do. Instead of me,
first step.
Instead of me saying, hey man, you just say colored, right? I'm not gonna make a big deal about that.
Right.
I'm making progress with this guy.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we can do is really
celebrate the small stuff and then educate.
Right.
And then go, well, you know, maybe you want to use a different term.
So I used that convention to prove a lot of theories to myself.
Yeah.
It also proved that sometimes we see racism where there's not. So one of these brothers, you know, he was at one booth and the guy wasn't giving him the attention he wanted, but people were in line at the booth. And he walks away, he goes, man, that white man right there, man, listen, man, he look at a brother like a brother ain't got no money. Listen, I got him much money, I could buy his whole booth, man. That brother, he had a whole story about why this guy was ignoring him because he was black. Well, I go to the booth later and he was a very nice man. He was just busy.
Yeah.
So sometimes we see racism in places that it doesn't exist, and we create this stalemate that doesn't have to exist.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has to be on us to take it to the next level with people and to break through the prejudice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, his framework was he doesn't like me because of the color of my skin versus he might be just busy. We talked about that in sex as well, right? Like, okay, did they treat me that way because I'm a girl? Sometimes, maybe, but maybe I just had a framework that wasn't the case. And so like for me the shift is what else could be happening? What else could be happening?
And even if he did, prove him wrong.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hi Mars, I noticed you popped in. It's funny because during quarantine, I wind up seeing so many people I haven't seen in so long just because people have more time. Although now everyone's getting back to work, things are opening up. Rodney's coming in from Vegas. Hopefully you're going to make this a habit coming into La Jolla.
We're having a good time. So
we are. So thanks for joining us. Feel free to ask any other questions if you come back from the future and watch this episode. Rodney will pop in and ask.
I'm going to share a poem with him. I do poetry.
Oh, a poem.
When I speak, I do poetry.
Yes, please do.
All right, so this is something to give you to take home, okay? Remember this. We're born on a certain date. There's a dash. And at some point in time, there's another date. It's not about those two dates. It's about the dash in between. It's what we do with that dash. Some of us are lucky enough to live a long life. Some of us, it might not be too long. Martin Luther King lived a mere 39 years and he changed the world. So this is a little gift for you. It's called In the Blink of an Eye. And it goes like this. In the blink of an eye, each moment becomes the past. You see, nothing stays forever. Only the memories last. A young woman, she dreams of her wedding day, but in a blink the day is here, and then it's gone away. Our babies and toddlers, we watch them frolic and play, but in a blink they grow up, and they're no longer this way. Now grown and on their own, in the blink of an eye, sometimes we all wonder, when did the years pass by? In the blink of an eye, our elders are gone. Suddenly it's upon us to pick up and carry on. In the blink of an eye, we are young no more, so ask yourself this one question, what am I waiting for? Live a life that's inspired. Don't let it end with regret. Find your purpose and your passion, one this world won't soon forget. The time is now, you've got one life to live, so spread your wings and fly. For this ride, it may be over in the blink of an eye. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and thank you for being a part of what's going to change the world. It's people like you that make a difference. Thank you for having me.
Rodney Allgood, ladies and gentlemen. The crowd goes wild. Thank you for coming on my show. I love you.
Love you too.
Oh, come back to La Jolla lots.
For sure.
And we'll get him back on the show, ask him any questions. I didn't know you did poetry.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. Aloha, everyone. And then teach him one more time the shaka.
Shaka, like this. Aloha, shaka.
Real quick.
Real quick. Be well.